देवा तुझे किती सुंदर आकाश, सुंदर प्रकाश सूर्य देतो.
He is Gandhian at heart, true Maharashtrian, but in true sense, a Konkani at the core of his soul.
But when someone asks me what's my home, it's Ratnagiri.
He is proud of his legacy and a heritage. He has a fighting spirit.
People ask me when I learned English. I say I know exactly the day I learned English.
A scientist par excellence, entrepreneur in his own right, naturalist as he is truly born. I have a great pleasure in inviting Dr. Nitin Pandit in this episode of In Conversation.
सुंदर चांदण्या चंद्र हा सुंदर, सुंदर चांदण्या चंद्र हा सुंदर.
As a fellow compatriot and a peer, I have been tracking Nitin's work for long over 2 decades now. However, very recently, about an year back, I got an opportunity to meet Nitin. On a very first instance, he reminded me of my master's degree colleague. What I found very quickly is Nitin is full of love, compassion, and empathy. He's easy to approach to and very easy to talk on variety of subjects. I started my Vishwas in Conversation session by asking Nitin about his childhood memories.
I was born in Ratnagiri. Um, I was born actually at home.
Okay.
It was a home. Um, and my grandparents' house, which was a lovely bungalow in Ratnagiri, and I was the eldest of the eldest in our sort of family line, and therefore I was very fortunate from day one, um, in some sense, in that sense that I was always the favored one. Uh, Everyone always sort of looked at me, and that has sort of followed through in my family all throughout. Um, and and so I've been blessed with the fortune of having an absolutely wonderful family, right from my grandparents. You can tell me that would you have taken anything else? Absolutely not. Uh, I don't care if someone says that could you have been born in the Gates family, and I would say no, thank you. I'm really happy with the family that I have.
Mhm.
So and the reason for that is the atmosphere that I remember in our place in Ratnagiri. Remember, as the eldest of the eldest, my grandfather was a public prosecutor, a Gandhian, and was a Gandhian spirit around the house. He did reasonably well. We were never extraordinarily rich in terms of monetary wealth. But I believe we were the richest family on earth. And I had the pleasure of sort of being the eldest, where one could actually get the feel of what it would be like if you were born into a place where you were free to do anything. We had beautiful garden, mango trees, chiku trees, guava trees, and so much wealth around us. Um, and I used to, in my childhood, I used to roam around with my grandmother over there.
Mm-hmm.
That vision of nature and the world and the people in it around me
Mm-hmm.
um, is a strong component of my being.
Mm-hmm.
Me, if someone asked me today, even though my wife and my children live in the US and my family's all over the world, but when someone asks me what's my home, it's Ratnagiri.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a strong association there. My great grandfather was also Gandhian, of course, going through the movement. All of us were very social minded. My great grandfather set up a school for the first time in Devruk in Ratnagiri,
Mm-hmm.
which is now a big institution with 1,200 students until the 12th, and now 1,200 in college.
Mm-hmm.
And we've just set up a master's and PhD program over there. So very sort of progressive in that standpoint. I believe Dr. Rajendra Prasad and Acharya Kriplani had come there to open the school back then. I
Mm-hmm.
just found that photograph actually, which was very cool.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so there's a lineage there which I'm very proud of.
Mm-hmm.
What was more important than that is a part of that lineage and something where should you be proud of it or should you be humbled by it? That becomes the question. And the family upbringing was such that no matter what you had, it was the humility that came first. Um, and so I think that was sort of it. Otherwise, the rest of my childhood has actually been on the move quite a bit, because in my early school days, I was in Mumbai with my parents, standard middle class family, small flat, nothing new. Went to Bal Mohan Vidya Mandir
Okay.
there for the first 5 years. And then my father took a number of career changes himself. Made us as a family move quite a bit. He first worked at that time at the Bank of India, and he was posted to the UK. So we went and lived in Pune for 1 year with my uncle. Then my mother went to the UK, and then I went and lived back in Ratnagiri because I always liked it with my sister. And then after that, we went to England. I was there for 3 years with my parents. And that was actually quite a formative part. That was from my, age of 12. So getting into the teens. But my very early days were set, in such a lovely family, coming from Ratnagiri, and up to the 5th standard, everything was nice, normal, and very good. And there were not too many abrupt changes until then. After the 5th, there were many changes, and some of them wonderful, and some of them lessons to learn from.
You said you moved to UK with your parents, and that was something that has a story with it,
Yeah.
as well as it had some impact or influence on how you are shaped up. So,
Yeah.
just would like to know about it.
Yeah, no, that's actually quite this thing. Remember, these are formative years. I was 12. My little sister, who I adore, she's 7 years younger to me, so she was a lovely young girl. And you see, my parents were already in the UK, and so it was a big deal at that time that 2 children alone would go in a flight to the UK, and that from Ratnagiri.
Okay.
I've been in an English school.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. I mean, barely I knew yes and no and so on. And so I went from, what was Patwardhan High School in Ratnagiri, okay, all the way to England in Kent, Orpington, and was in a school where there were only white people around me. There was one black person from Jamaica or something. He was quite senior to me. And there was one, I believe, maybe an Indian teacher or something. But really, I was the only child. I was a little plump and completely out of date when it came to the late 60s, where, Led Zeppelin and Jethro Tull and all these, the Beatles were at the top and so on. I had no clue. I had no clue about any of this. And so I ended up in a school, and remember at that time, the British Raj was still in the minds of the people. And a politician by the name of Enoch Powell was very popular then, who laid the foundations for what is today Brexit.
Right.
That he didn't want to participate in the European Union. And that was quite an experience, because that's when the movement started, where there were skinheads, as they are called, who came into existence, and they were very violent people, white supremacists, basically. And they basically, we go through a little bit of ragging or hazing in our engineering colleges and things.
Right.
But I think I've seen a lot worse. It's to be alone in that environment when you don't know the language is not easy. My mother used to worry about me all the time. They used to take my shoes and throw them away in snow, and I used to walk back bare feet. So it was, I used to get beaten up, thrown to the back of the line all the time. And remember, coming from a sort of what would be a Gandhian, Brahmin family in India, where you are actually seeing racism direct on the other side, is a complete transformation in terms of, how you view the world. People ask me when I learned English. I say I know exactly the day I learned English. The day I learned English was, there was this skinhead who used to bother me particularly. And after school, they used to come and surround me and, trouble me. And so on. And actually, the only reason why, when I learned English, let me go back to that, is at one day I gathered my courage to say, as a person who was born in a Gandhian family, in very broken English, I will meet you after school at 5 o'clock.
Okay. That's daring.
And frankly, the anger just spilled over. And I actually bashed him up pretty badly.
Okay.
I think I say this as a Gandhian at heart. Really, that's the day I learned English.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
And then I went through changes, 2 or 3 schools, because my father moved and all that. So a lot of changes, adapting to new people, new environments, with this environment of Enoch Powell and so on. All this was directly experienced in those 3 years.
Okay.
So I've seen the other side. I've seen what it feels like.
Okay.
And that has had a big influence on me. I would say that the only reason why I survived well in the UK schools at that time was because I think my maths was better than everyone, so I could complete everyone's homework.
Okay.
And and so being learned to be resourceful, I guess, and also figured out that being the opening batsman didn't hurt either. So when I came to Mumbai, it was again a new set of friends. But that's when I started, you're into your teens and you start making lifelong friends, and so on. So I did. There are some friends who I'm still in touch with, and in the age of WhatsApp, I mean, things always come back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was in school, and then after that, I got admission to IIT. I went through the entrance exam, but I wanted to do something else because again, we had met in England, in Cambridge at that time. Another very influential personality. Again, I've been very fortunate in meeting people like this. Narlikar was in Cambridge.
Jan.
And my father and he were good friends. My father's no more. And so we used to go and visit Dr. Narlikar over there.
Okay.
And I always, it was awe-inspiring to meet a person like that. When I came back, I decided that instead of going to IIT, I went to Birla Institute Pilani, BITS Pilani.
Right.
Because they had an observatory there. And because Dr. Narlikar told me there were some very good people doing some work over there. Doing that with the idea of doing astronomy and astrophysics, which actually I dabbled in for a number of years. At that time, I ran the observatory there for 3 years. Repaired it, and it was a wonderful, lovely, lovely experience. But it was because of Dr. Narlikar that I actually ended up going to a place like Pilani, which was in the middle of the desert, at least at that time. Now, urbanization is occurring everywhere. But there were people who, because it was so isolated, there was no city to make fun for you. If you had to have fun, if you wanted to enjoy, you had to create the environment for that.
Correct.
So they were, so either you loved Pilani or you hated Pilani, and I happen to again be very fortunate in meeting friends with whom I'm deeply in touch with, like a lot of our engineering graduates.
Correct. Yeah.
There's nothing different in that. But Pilani provided the sort of the ecosystem, the microcosm that one could actually nurture, and I really enjoyed that. And so.
So how were the days in Pilani in terms of shaping your scientific aptitude or exploratory mindset? Because, maintaining an observatory itself is a quest to explore. Were there any specific foundations that were set to who you became later on as an entrepreneur or as an innovator?
Yeah, so I think what happened was those were the times when, there were a lot of societal changes. We went through the emergency under Mrs. Gandhi. We were very active as students, as you can imagine.
Right.
Those were the times when, computers were just beginning to come in. So we were playing around with these ideas. There was a lot of this nouveau excitement. And on the cultural side, there was a lot of nouveau excitement. That's when Chabildas High School was putting up plays, and that's when we could see Amol Palekar and Nasiruddin Shah 3 feet away from you when they were young. And that's when we could play, we could put up plays in Pilani with minimal props, whether it was Haivadan or Wait Until Dark or whatever they were. Small single skits to this thing. So drama had a lot of impact there. Music, our cultural festival had a lot of impact there. And so we had a very involved group in debates, declamation. I mean, there was activity, continuous activity. There was no respite at all. And what it did was it suddenly exposed your mind to where you were seeing that yes, while you are doing your own studies and learning things like, calculus and thermodynamics and management, but it was subjects like the history of science, or other things that actually mattered a lot. And that's where life actually came about.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you learned to do was to put a perspective on science, and technology.
Mm-hmm.
To actually start thinking about how does this matter to in our day-to-day life. So whether it was whether they were my friends who were doing backstage work and playing with sound systems or light systems, or whether there were people who were actually delivering the debates and declamations. So, and people like Navtej Sarna and others debated during that time.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I mean, these are all people that we ran across. We got all the artists over there. And so what Pilani taught us was that there was a wholesomeness to science and technology and where it fitted in, and the concept that science and technology are actually social artifacts is something that sort of got inculcated in us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
From my personal standpoint, and I think this happened in a number of campuses at that time. So Pilani wasn't unique. It was a little unique because it was so far away.
Correct.
But from my personal life, something else happened on the side which helped put some more perspective on and my interest and curiosity in sort of discovery and so on. And it was in my third year, I met with, and I searched out, and I met with one gentleman called Mr. K.R. Date.
Okay.
And K.R. Date, you may have heard of him. He was a, I'm at a loss of words. He was my mentor.
Okay.
He was my...
as you are speaking, I have goosebumps on my hand. Because some of these stories, and you specifically spoke, I mean, sorry that I'm interrupting.
No, go ahead.
One of the things that you spoke, that this wholesomeness taught you that everything has impact on everything. And the campuses that are far away from urban settings actually do provide you that uninterrupted experience of wholesomeness.
Correct. Exactly. That's why I said it was a microcosm where the training was perfect, because we could see some of those connections and appreciate them, and it still comes through, But how to think through that at young age was something that was tremendously helped, because again, I was fortunate and I met with Mr. Date.
Okay.
Mr. Date, is, I don't know what to say about him. He was like a father to me. And that interaction continued until he passed away in 2007. He was in the US. He used to come and spend 2 weeks to a month with me every year almost.
Okay.
And so I was very fortunate. And this man who had gone through, who had debated in those circles in Pune with, whether it was S.M. Joshi along with Didi Kosambi and so on. Then those stories that came about, yet he could host, Abhangavanis in his house, so understood music, deep understanding of history, and he was an engineer par excellence. I have never met anyone who was that good an engineer. And I met him in my third year in my summer school. I searched him out because I'd heard that he was unusual, and by God, he was unusual. And for him, I've done things like literally, gone to Crawford Market and carried gunny bags full of, fibrous materials to test in concrete, and believable variety of things. And what he had was a method of trying to understand these systems. And what drew me towards this, and which happened to coincide with the Pilani experience, was that how does one think through this? Okay, without being self-congratulatory, without, how does one actually think about things, no matter what they are? And that combination was influential, and it remains deeply influential until today. That formed the character of my education later on, even though I've met after that people who, Nobel laureates and things who I've directly interact with, but foundation is what was the setting stone for it.
So what was it to arrive in US? Because US was definitely that point in time as well was seen as a land of dream. You can fulfill all your dream. Also, to some extent, a land of equality. If someone is having an experience in UK, which was not so pleasant, how was it to arrive in US and then thereafter to lead life in US?
So, right on day one, when I landed at John F. Kennedy and had to go to Lehigh University, which is in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which is a few hours away, 4 hours away, maybe 3 hours away. I had $8 in my pocket, like most of the other students that I went with, I suppose.
Correct.
Foreign exchange controls and all that. I was a Tata scholar, so I did have a Tata scholarship, which paid for at least some part of my education. So, but what was interesting was when I got down at JFK, I actually hadn't planned too much. My head was just full of just ideas, and I wanted to play with. At that time, I got into civil and water resources engineering. So I wanted to play with water resources and soils and geotechnical, and it was all idealistic, and I wanted to just be there. That's all. So frankly, I hadn't even planned how to get from JFK to Bethlehem. So here I was, 2 bags with a camera, proper desi, fresh off the boat kind of person, and landed up in JFK. And okay, now how do I get to Bethlehem, right? So I had to take 2 trains all the way to 42nd Street, which you can imagine is an experience by itself.
Right.
Because that's that used to be, at least, all the red light district and all that. And then take a bus from there to Bethlehem, where I had no place to stay because I hadn't done anything. So it was pretty callous, frankly. Looking back, I wouldn't advise my children to do this. So, anyway, but what happened was at JFK, a fellow came and big, tall, black guy, came and was with me and met me, and I didn't know him, and I sort of said, hello, and sort of went on. I got onto those 2 trains. They were sort of pretty much empty. I had these and a camera, and I didn't know. And he was sitting right next to me. The train was empty, and he sat next to me. And when I changed trains, he stayed with me and sat next to me all the way to the bus. On 42nd Street, he was right next to me. And I didn't know what to say to him because he was big, tall, and I said, "My God, wow! Am I going to get mugged or what? I mean, first day, and I have nothing." And he comes to me to the bus, to the Greyhound bus, and as I loaded, I couldn't hold myself back at the end, and I said, "My dear friend, I mean, are you going to come with me all the way?" And he looked at me and he laughed, and he took his jacket and opened it, and there was a New York police badge, and he said, "Welcome to America, be safe."
Oh, okay. What an experience.
And he went away.
Okay. So that was just to ensure the safety.
That's right.
And,
that's where on the first stepping off of the plane, I saw America right there.
Yeah. So we all.
And till today, that tells me, about America, that you, it's it's one sentence. It's the best of the best and the worst of the worst. You
True.
have.
And you probably would have had both of those experiences. But also, as you were talking, when you opened the jacket and showed me the New York police, showed you the New York police, sometimes we don't believe in the incidences. We think that there is not a connection or the so-called spirituality or a divine interest or divine interventions. But looking back, I'm sure you would have stumbled upon this thought that was the divine intervention to happen in my life, just to make sure that
Yes.
I'll stay safe.
You definitely think about that, because how would I have possibly known and expected this? There's just no way.
And so how was it at Bethlehem then?
Oh, Bethlehem was wonderful. Again, I met a lot of good friends. I got my first master's degree over there in geotechnical engineering. I learned a lot from my advisor, Dr. Fang, and Dr. Aney and Dr. Richards. These were very good engineers. I learned a lot about laboratory work and so on. And I did some good work myself and made a lot of friends at my master's level who have now gone on to do bigger and better things also. So it was a great project, but what was most important about Bethlehem was that I met my wife Manjusha.
Right. And I was about to come to that and share that story, because people often think that you or we as a scientist or innovators probably are least interested into being into love affairs, to speak.
Yeah, right.
How was those interactions with Manjusha?
Well, I mean, it was just a fantastic time. I mean, in the sense, so she wasn't a student at Lehigh University. Her parents had already moved there. So she was with her parents and so on. And there weren't that many Maharashtrian people at that time and so on. So it was a classic matchup, right? I mean, and at that time, there were no VCRs, right? So no. So we had Indian or Hindi movies being shown in auditoria in universities, right? So we all used to meet there and so on. I met Manjusha there and so on, and just over time, I mean, we kept on meeting, on, and things sort of just stumbled into that. But it was really wonderful because one of the things that happens when you're out there is that even though you have friends and so on, to talk to someone in Marathi, to talk about your own things and so on, it's good. It's great company. It's a classic matchup. She happened to be from Pune, so everything. Yeah, so everything worked out really well. Right from Shanwarwada, so right from Shanwarpet in that area. So I mean, it was, in fact, the first party that we went to at their place. One of my very dear friends, Ajay, who's now back in Baroda, he's a big industrialist. He's one of the most innovative people I know.
Right.
He said when we came back, because she and her sister were both there, right? So both potentially.
Right.
And and Manjusha is the younger one. So Ajay actually, when we came back, he says, "Yaar Nitin, ye tera yahan par jamne wala hai." So I said, "What kar raha hai?" He says. And as a student, I said, "Acha to kaun si usme se?" I wasn't serious or anything, so nothing in fact. He says, "नहीं, वो number 2 वाली वहाँ पर जमने वाला."
Wasn't that fun? That you don't realize that you are actually.
Yeah, and people can see that when the chemistry works out. I mean, that people can see.
Definitely.
So, And it worked out just great. Yeah. I mean, she was, I would say, again, taking a metaphor, in Rome, if you go to the Sistine Chapel,
Correct.
right outside, there's a beautiful painting called the School of Athens. It's a very famous painting.
Yeah.
And it shows all the philosophers and scientists of the era when they were in Greece. Mm-hmm. And right in the center of it, okay, is Plato and Aristotle. Okay, and Aristotle was a student, and it's just magnificent. And it was Plato with his ideas, his Platonic ideas. So his hand is pointing up to the sky.
Yeah.
Aristotle, the young student with a bunch of books in his hand with a flowing blue robe, showing with his hand down, saying that you must at the same time keep your feet on the ground.
Yeah. So if Nitin,
that representation.
Yeah, so if Nitin is a Plato, then Manjusha is an Aristotle in that sense.
I'm a Platonic fool on that sense, yes, and she sets me straight when it's needed. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So after your first master's degree, how does life shaped professionally?
So professionally, I found a job in a very good company. It was very well known at that time. Later on, there was a merger and all that, called Woodward Clyde Consultant. They were the premier firm in geotechnical engineering at that time, and I had a good job there. I got married in '82, so we came to India, got married in Scouts Pavilion in Shivaji Park,
right,
and then back again, both of us. So the joke was that because Manjusha's family was there, the in our family was that Nitin Sasri Sallai.
Oh,
so it was just this thing. So anyway, but yeah, we went back, and then after that, the '81 recession hit,
right,
which was deeper than the one in 2008.
Yeah.
Okay, Reagan had just come into the office, and it was a very deep recession. Somehow I had found a job. But while I was doing all my field work, absolutely fantastic stuff in engineering and science and so on, really very cool things to learn. And then suddenly the recession hit and I got laid off. Then later on, the same company accommodated me and brought me on board. They were happy with my work, and they posted me to Cleveland, where I was for another 2.5 years.
Correct.
And I did all kinds of interesting stuff. By then, my eldest Ulka was born. This is now 1984. And exposed through one of my contacts to the work that was just coming up in Carnegie Mellon University.
Okay.
And this was the starting field of artificial intelligence.
Okay.
Vishwas, I tell you, the work that was being done there was headed up by the Nobel laureates Herb Simon and Alan Newell. And the Robotics Institute was just set up by Dr. Raj Reddy.
Oh, right. Yeah. I had.
That's what I.
Right. Go ahead. Yeah.
So I left my job. That's it. I'm done. And I joined the program at the Robotics Institute because I was just interested in knowing, what is this thing? How can we make, this understanding of this holistic science and yet make sense out of it and yet apply it in practice as an engineer or as a social worker? How can we actually put this in practice? Because this is the fundamental component of it, is that how do you understand systems for which you have incomplete knowledge? And the field of AI, what Herb Simon, was to try and identify ways in which we can try to understand these incomplete systems, incomplete knowledge systems.
Right.
That's what I went to try and understand. and I was drawn to it like crazy. And I was there for 2 years. And that actually taught me a lot, working with Herb and Jeff Hinton, who set up the whole idea of neural networks and is now the CTO of Google. Doyle and those guys, the work that was done in Carnegie Mellon, MIT, Stanford, Purdue, and so on at that time in AI was foundational. Frankly, what we are doing in AI today in terms of machine learning and so on, barely the tip of the iceberg in terms of the thing that's in AI. It's barely, not even, it just, there's a lot more. And it was so rich, and it still stays. So we learned the foundations when the computing power was not with us.
Right. And that's...
To actually understand. You had to actually understand. You couldn't just throw computing power and data at something. You had to understand, what does computing mean? What do you do with it? How does it represent us? You represent DNA. What does it mean? And that was just very deep learning for me. Very hard, because I was changing my career completely. So I had some very hard knocks at that time, because it wasn't easily accepted, because I was bringing these very practical ideas from engineering and so on. And whereas these folks were doing fundamental research for research's sake many a times, saying that we don't expect anyone to see any results for the next 30 to 50 years. And they actually to be right. I was wrong from their perspective, because we are seeing now the beginnings of AI come back again 30 to 50 years. So in that sense, they were correct. And I have to say that I was wrong. But I didn't fit into that as well, but I learned. I learned a lot. And so that's how, and then in 86, when my second daughter was born at that time, I got hired into a company, an environmental company, which is a very foresightful leader and so on in the environmental space. And I worked with them to set up their, for 5 years I worked there till 91. And I set up their computer-aided engineering group, which back then looked at some of those concepts in AI to solve environmental problems. And I would say even today, I still go back to some of the papers and things that I wrote at that time, because in today's world also, we're still not there. So it was definitely ahead of time. And I just got the opportunity to work with and understand Herb Simon, who was a very, very dear man. And so again, another person to look up to and learn from. And again, I was very fortunate. And then I came to the 90s, and that's when I stuck out and I set up my own company.
We were immersed in our conversation. Our conversation lasted almost for another 90 minutes. It is simply impossible to pack it into one episode. And therefore, stay tuned for part 2 of Vishwas In Conversation with Dr. Nitin Pandit. Tomorrow at 1900 hours, right over here. See you then.
Deva tuze कीर्ति सुंदर आकाश सुंदर प्रकाश सूर्य देतो सुंदर चांदण्या चंद्र हा सुंदर